Gurdjieff talks about that man is asleep and that he has a conditioned nature, meaning that the environment we grew up in shapes our lives. So if your parents were narcissistic, violent, abusive, distant, and you will become just like that, not able to connect, feel disconnected with others and yourself. And no matter what kind of background you were brought up in, you still have a mind that is dormant and can be awakened. I think Gurdjieff gives us a real good insight about human nature, written in Search of the Miraculous. I find Gurdjieff's ideas very provocative and in certain ways very clear and truthful. However, Gurdjieff doesn't give us an idea how to really awake, how to access the mind, the true intelligence. Now, there's an ego intellect that expresses a very high IQ. But having high IQ, you might have an IQ of 130, 160, or 200. I mean, very smart. You're able to gather a lot of information and access that information. It's all stored in your memory. However, well, even though you become a doctor or an attorney or a businessman, or you might be satisfied with just living off the grid, so to speak. But you have a so-called a high IQ. You never had to study in school. Everything was rather easy intellectually. But school or college or universities never ask you to reflect and think. Everything was done by rote, by memory. I think only if you took a class in philosophy or even literature, you're asked to think for yourself, and it's very difficult. Now, Spinoza wrote his ethics over 250 years ago, called the Ethics. And the Ethics gives us an idea how to change our character. What does that mean, to change our character? Well, Spinoza had an aim, an idea, that it's possible to come to a higher level of being or consciousness. Now, you might hear the word consciousness and you have an association of it. But Spinoza's idea of consciousness is more than just being aware of our desires and our emotions and our reactions. There is a higher level of consciousness, and I think Gurdjieff talks about it in Search of the Miraculous. Well, In Search of the Miraculous was also written by Ouspensky. Ouspensky was a student of Spinoza for about 15 years. Of Gurdjieff. Ouspensky was a student of Gurdjieff for about 15 years, and then he went on his own. And I think he wrote a great book called In Search of the Miraculous, and it was his rendering of what he saw and heard from Gurdjieff. And I think he did a very good job. However, I don't think he really understood Gurdjieff, but he wrote about what Gurdjieff's ideas were. And I think that as you learn how to awaken your mind, you understand Gurdjieff even more than what Gurdjieff came to. Because Gurdjieff does not really explain what is the intelligence. What does it mean to awake? What is awaken? I've learned through Spinoza that I and you, everyone has this intelligence that's more than just having a high IQ. It's an intelligence that can reflect upon itself to come to clear ideas. Spinoza knew that understand the nature of the mind. The mind is comprised of ideas that are clear and ideas that are confused. We must know the difference. False ideas are confused ideas. Most of our beliefs contain false ideas. If you grew up in a religious background, if you were a Catholic like I was, we were told to, everybody's who has a religious background, believe that Jesus died for our sins, which is absurd. Jesus was a man, just like you and I, if you were a male. Um, and they also believe that he died for our sins, which is a story. And they also said that Jesus was the God or the Son of God. What does that mean? Spinoza clarifies that Jesus, yes, was a man, and he came to wisdom, just like you and I and everyone else can come to wisdom. But what is this wisdom? It's called the understanding. When the mind is active, it comes to clarity. It understands. A good example is you believe that you have free will and that everyone else has free will. Well, where did you get this belief from? You never question it. A good example, you're driving and someone cuts in front of you. And now you have this strong emotion, anger. Or you're at the looking for a parking spot when you go to Costco or a supermarket. And you're waiting for someone to get out of their space for you to go into that space. And someone cuts in front of you. That is my space. And now you experience pain, hate, and anger automatically. Did you decide to go into hate, pain, and anger? No. Because you and I and everyone else have a desire. And if your desires are not met, you'll automatically come to pain. And what is pain? A decrease of power. I lost my power. I have no power to act at this moment. And the only thing you can do is experience hate and anger. So freedom is to learn how to understand your emotions. And when you understand your emotions, you'll begin to experience freedom. You begin to understand that you live by the law of necessity and that we do not have free will. No, neither does anybody else. Everybody follows the law of necessity. And what does that mean? It is necessary that we do whatever we're doing with the knowledge that we have. So if you believe that everybody should obey the law and be courteous and respectful, and so that's your idea of human nature. Well, that seems nothing wrong with that. But if someone violates that attitude or that premise you have, then your idea is checked. That person is in violation of your belief and attitude. Likewise, you will do things that interfere with what other people believe or negate their beliefs. So how can we come to freedom? Freedom from our emotional identifications, for our emotional reactions, to clarity. And what we need to do is learn how to journal, to identify the situation that triggers us, and to write about it, to reflect upon it. And there is a way. If you visit my website at wayofspinoza.com, there's a lot of videos, books that you can access and look at and endeavor to understand. But I must warn you, you cannot do this by yourself. See, one thing you don't realize, that we all have an ego. And this ego says, I don't need help. I can figure this out myself. Really? You believe you have free will. You believe you can change just by you wanting to change. Let me ask you, you have this idea about going to the gym, and you're enthused about it, and after maybe 2 or 3 weeks, you lose interest. What happened? Well, you want to go on a special health diet, and you want to stop eating chips and sodas and ice cream on a regular basis. You want to come back. And so maybe you try it for a few days, and suddenly you're eating chips and drinking sodas. What happened? You can't willfully change. You must understand and want something. There must be a strong desire to change. A desire stronger than the other desire that wants the chips and the sodas. All right. So there is a way. I wrote a book called The Way of Spinoza and Gurdjieff. This book is a case study of my students who volunteered. There are some videos you want to look at also, testimonials of how I work. But this book, I just wrote it. It's on Amazon.com. It comes on Kindle or hard copy or paperback. And it's not that expensive, but it's case studies of individuals, how they use Spinoza to change their beliefs and their attitudes and come to a whole new character. Rather than having a high IQ, a prideful self, you come to a reality, come to a higher level of being, a conscious state. You want to come to love? You must love yourself first. Love your effort to understand. Then you're able to love others. You want approval? You're seeking approval from others? You must find your own approval. Where is that? Within your own mind and understanding. Seeking from others is useless. It will never satisfy you. There's an inner need in all of us that must be filled. A need for self-approval and a need for love, self-love. And this can only happen when you awaken your intelligence. Thanks for listening.